Alright, so the Critical Role Campaign 4 parties have at last split. The soldiers, seekers, and the schemers going their separate ways. Today, we're talking about episode 5, the soldier episode. I think this one was really good. It wasn't nearly as eventful as the first 4 episodes of the season, predictably so, considering the overture was very dramatic. But if anything, the more low-key aspect of today's episode was honestly what I really, really loved about it. And I think the dynamic between the soldiers is already starting off really strong, particularly because of Sam Riegel. Sam is playing a very interesting archetype of character with this party, and I think it's something that can either make your game way better or way worse, because Sam Riegel's character, Wikander, can't seem to stop causing trouble. So, today, we're going to be taking some interesting lessons, both from Sam Riegel and from Brentley Mulligan, the Dungeon Master. We're going to be doing our recap, our review, our whole 9 yards. So, without further ado, guys, let's get started. Okay, let's start off with the recap. As always, I'm not going to be giving you the full point-by-point on what happened in the episode, just very loose cliff notes on the vibes. Today's episode, we're definitely winding down. Episode 4 of Critical Role was extreme. The darkest hour, where everything went wrong. The slaughter at the Divino's Plaza, the death and resurrection of Octus, the beginning of our adventure. But now, we're going back to a much more relaxed vibe, winding down once the darkest hour is done. We actually started the episode not with the soldiers, but with the seekers and schemers. Brennan took the time to establish their adventures, what's going on there. The schemers are going to be staying in Dolmakiar to destabilize the sundered houses from within, whereas the seekers are heading off with Octus to both protect him, as he has the Night Song stone thing, but also to uncover the mysteries of the stone itself and uncover the mysteries behind some kind of mysterious psionic drumming noise. It's all very dramatic. Honestly, this opening part of the episode, I thought it was solid, but again, it was definitely very much a bunch of establishment stuff for future episodes of the show. We really, really got our feet set once we went to the soldiers themselves. This is their episode after all, and honestly, guys, I know we don't know anything about the other parties at this point beyond the characters that are in them. We haven't seen any episodes from any of the other parties, but man, it's going to be hard to beat the soldiers because this was really solid. Again, not much happened this episode. They were really just like traveling down the road. It was very Arya and the Hound from Game of Thrones season 4, I believe. They were just traveling throughout this medieval land, encountering random strangers along the way, but I love that. Like, this is the exact kind of thing I fell in love with fantasy and Critical Role specifically for. Not the big cosmic nonsense that we got in Campaign 3, but a much more low-key adventure where the characters are taking center precedent. Seriously, everyone here was putting in so much into making this party incredibly likable. Here, everyone's mostly familiar with each other, allowing us to get right into some charming character interactions. It was easy to keep up with and incredibly fun to watch. Tayor and Thimble having their little argument over stressed fur. You had Tyranny constantly pulling Wikander's leash, making sure he's not going to mess up their quest. Everyone's doing great. I loved this episode, and if this is what we can expect from the soldier party, I think this is going to be the party I stick to the most, which I could not have expected. So, with that being said, we already kind of reviewed the episode itself, but there is one last thing I do want to review before we end this recap and review segment, and that is the brand new intro. Yeah, that's right, Critical Role Campaign 4 have finally revealed their intro for this campaign. It's another live action one, as normal with most Critical Role campaigns, and it's okay. I thought it was pretty okay. Now, I know that a lot of people are going to be really mad at me for this because I get that the concept is sick, and I love the concept. The intro seems to be one of Hal's plays, Liam O'Brien's character. He runs a theater, and so it makes sense. There are plays in that theater, and this seems to be one of those plays. I think the idea is so awesome and matches the vibe of this campaign very well. We seem to have completely abandoned the idea that this is some average normal D&D game. The kind of intro they did in campaign 2 with like the 80s kids gathered around the table in the living room, that doesn't really fit the vibe anymore. This more dramatic, epic tableau at the theater, no, this matches the vibe way better. But even though it matches the vibe, I still think the scenery itself is very disconnected from the show itself. Like, there's no cast members in any of this footage. And I'm not trying to knock the actors who are on camera here. They're all doing really well. I think there's lots of sick shots. Like, the aerial silks were awesome. I love the boats on the faux waves. That looked great. I think the cinematography is great. The shots are awesome. The actors are doing a good job. But it still feels disconnected from Critical Role itself. We've always had either the characters or the actors themselves on screen in the intro in some way. If we weren't going to have the actors in the intro, at the very least, have some representation of the characters themselves. The shots feel completely disconnected from the characters. They just put the names up randomly and honestly, seemingly arbitrarily to fill the space. It didn't really fit well, in my opinion. I think the text is also awkwardly placed, just kind of stuck on the side to sides, kind of like a kid with his first editing program, just sticking some fancy text on the board and calling it a day. I think the font and text color that they chose also really reminds me of The Secret. And if you know anything about The Secret, you know why I don't like being reminded of The Secret. Good lord. But look, I still like the intro. I don't think it's bad by any means, but I don't love it. And while I do think this fits the vibe more than the Campaign 2 intro, I still think that one's better. Because, you know, the casts were actually in it. I do hope they continue with this play concept in one way or another, but have the cast be actually represented in some way instead of just tacking their names on there and calling it a day. Because even though Critical Role's logo appears at the end, it still felt largely disconnected from Critical Role. But yeah, I just criticized Critical Role. I'm sure that's going to be great for my engagement. Anyway, let's move on to the lessons. This video is sponsored by Ian from Little House Lessons. Little House Lessons is your quest companion for learning piano, guitar, bass guitar, ukulele, mandolin, and more, along with studying music theory, ear training, songwriting, song production. This guy does it all. Look, private lessons may seem intimidating, but they are the best thing to bring out your talent in music. I was a saxophone player for a long time, and I had my own private tutor. That guy is the reason I got good at all. He's also been a teacher for decades, and the first 30 people who sign up with my link get free lessons. 2 free 30-minute lessons or 1 free 60-minute lesson. It's a free, no obligation trial. You don't want to miss out on that. If you guys are interested, then you can head down to the description down below or to the pinned comment where you can get Little House Lessons for yourself. Remember, first 30 people get free lessons. So hurry up. Do not miss that opportunity. Thank you so much, Little House Lessons, for sponsoring today's episode. As always, supporting our sponsors does support us. And without further ado, back to class. Okay, first up, a lesson for us Dungeon Masters, and this comes right in the opening minutes of the episode, the cold open, where Brennan asks each of the soldier party how they feel about their departure from Dol Machiar. The lesson here is to ask your players questions, get the vibe of what's going on. Oftentimes, Dungeon Masters just go on narrating what's happening, asking their players, like, if they want to roll a skill check or something like that, but we don't often ask, how are you guys feeling? Asking your party to vocalize how their characters feel is a really good way to get the vibe of the group as they're going into some new journey or some new element of their quest. I really love how it also builds contrast between the characters. These are all wildly different people going on a pretty intense life journey. They're leaving the city where most of them have spent most of their lives. They're leaving it and going on a revenge quest out in the wilderness beyond, hiding away from a very powerful royal house. This is a big deal, and all of them feel differently about it. Brennan asking them each, hey, how do you feel about this or that, helps them to vocalize that and build that contrast between the characters, see that separation, and see what makes each of them unique. For example, Thimble Thimble was asked how she feels about this quest to avenge her best friend Thiazi Fang. She feels determined. She feels like this is her purpose, and she is driven to see this through. Wikander, on the other hand, he's incredibly nervous about leaving this city. He's a sheltered noble boy, and now he's out here in the wilds. Whereas Cadogan Vale, he's back in his element. He feels like he belongs. He's excited. Honestly, I'm getting goosebumps just describing it because, guys, I was not hyped about Cadogan before, but now I see how he fits. He felt so out of place in the city because of course he did. He didn't belong in there. He belongs out there in the wilds. He's a true hunter at heart, and honestly, I love him for that. I love this character now, and it's because Brennan used this question as an opportunity to build each and every one of the characters. I would also say this is a lesson for players, because I noticed throughout the episode that players would ask each other questions about themselves or about their backstories. Look, there's nothing better as a player than being asked about something related to your character or something related to your backstory. Gives you a chance to talk about yourself. Everyone loves that. And if you ask somebody about their story, they're more likely to ask you about your story. Normalize asking these kinds of questions, especially at roleplay heavy tables. It will allow you to build that party bond much more and build inter-party roleplay, which allows the Dungeon Master to sit back a little bit. Speaking of DMs sitting back, now we move on to our other DM lesson. If you're a DM who wants your players to roleplay with NPCs or roleplay amongst each other, then you need to reward them for that roleplay. In this episode, I think a prime example is when the party stumbled upon a little guy trapped in a gibbet, a prisoner, a criminal. They roleplayed with the guy, they realized that he knows Thimble, Laura Bailey's character, and after a brief exchange, they ended up setting him free, giving him a horse and some food and a gold coin and sending him on his way. This resulted in that man rewarding the party for their efforts by giving them some information that furthered their quest. If Brennan hadn't done that, then that would have been a very newbie mistake, but instead he did the smart thing, which was reward the players for good behavior. Look, this guy is grateful, and while he's obviously a destitute prisoner who doesn't have anything to give them in exchange, he does have information. That's not a crazy thing to expect, and therefore the players are encouraged to help more people in the future. This is a heroic party. It would make sense that Brennan is wanting to reward them for their heroism. Look, as DMs, you need to reward behavior, therefore you will encourage it more in the future. I often find DMs who complain that, oh, my players, they are always murder hoboing around my worlds, they're never interact with my NPCs, they're distrustful of everything, and that last one in particular, that gets me to raise my eyebrow. Like, look, some parties suck. It's true. Some players suck. They're problem players. It happens. But look, sometimes I find the DMs are very attuned to creating conflict, not necessarily rewarding good behavior. We would rather, poison our players with wicked, terrible wine, or trick our players to a devil's bargain by having their favorite shopkeeper turn out to be an archfiend. Ooh. Look, that stuff is all great. But if you're doing that all the time, your players are never going to trust the world around them, and they're going to murder hobo everything because everything is seemingly against them and seemingly evil. You need to reward players. A pleasant, good surprise will encourage this kind of behavior. I'm not saying you gotta shower your players with rewards all the time, but little things like giving them a minor item or a little bit of information goes a long way in encouraging this kind of roleplay in the future. Reward the behavior you want, and that behavior will happen more often. I will also note that Brennan did the other side of this equation. He clearly wanted these people to roleplay with this prisoner, and so he didn't just make the prisoner a random piece of set dressing like I thought he was going to when the prisoner first showed up. No, instead, Brennan made the prisoner interesting. This guy had his own little quirk by being a sort of concierge for the nearby inn, banging his cell into the tavern to let them know that guests have arrived. This prisoner also had direct tie to the party by knowing Thimble, encouraging them to roleplay with him. Again, another reason why I see DMs who have players that don't interact much with their NPCs, because they don't make their NPCs very interesting, you know? Alchemist number 5 shows up. Great, awesome, I love that for us. No, this random guy had a lot of character to him, and that encouraged the party to engage. Now, obviously, these are live streaming professional voice actors who are masters of improv. They're going to engage with the world because that's what they're supposed to do. They're on camera. But even if you're playing with people who, aren't doing that, this is still a very useful trait for getting your people to engage with the world around them. Okay, last up, the lesson for players courtesy of Sam Riegel. This could either be a good lesson or a bad lesson because Sam is playing a very interesting character in my mind. He's kind of a freaking useless idiot. Actually, no, scratch that. He's worse than useless. Sometimes he's actively sabotaging the rest of the party. And this is awesome. It can also be very dangerous, though. You see, I know they seem like very different characters, but Wakander is actually playing the same role that Julian Devinos is playing in The Secret Party. Matt Mercer's character, Julian, is also an instigator. It's just that Julian instigates things with his sword and by being an asshole, whereas Wakander, he instigates conflict by being a bumbling fool, by messing up. He accidentally spills that he is a member of House Halavar to this random prisoner, possibly putting their quest into jeopardy. He puts his chalice into the water near Thimble while she's trying to negotiate with a scared fairy. He screws around with Wulfric a little bit too much, possibly getting him in odds with one of his party members' animal companions. This kind of behavior builds fun and interesting conflict for the party to handle. It actually helps that Sam Riegel has a built-in handler in the form of Whitney Moore's character. I know I called her Whitney Avalon this one time a couple videos back. I still get comments about it. I know, I feel stupid. I know, I'm dumb, I'm stupid, I'm bad with names, okay, clearly? Anyway, look, the point is Whitney Moore's character, Tyranny, is pulling on Sam's leash constantly. When he messes up, she pulls him from the edge. She gives him the pep talk, the lecture. And all of this is great. If you can have that kind of dynamic with another person at your party, if you communicate that properly to the GM and the rest of the players, you can have a really great character for building some fun roleplay situations. Look, at tabletop games, we often think of the DM as the only person who can instigate conflict, but that's not true. Players are capable of doing it as well. Now, I will note that while Sam's character is an idiot, Sam Riegel himself is not. He's being very smart about this. Look, instigators, in some circles, are problem players because not every instigation is good. Some people instigate by being too hostile to the point where it almost feels like an out-of-game problem. Some people instigate by causing PvP, getting someone else's character killed. Some people trap other characters in AoE spells and deal unneeded damage to them. This kind of stuff, it's a lot less fun. See, Sam's instigations, they're little things. Little roleplay moments that make conversations a lot more tense because when everything is going well, it's not nearly as interesting. But he's not instigating in a way that's going to get anyone killed. He's not tossing fireball at the feet of the party. That would be a lot less fun. The key is you need to instigate in a way that creates interesting roleplay, not shuts down other people or gets their characters killed. Another great thing that this kind of character concept does, though, and this is arguably the biggest one that a lot of people don't do in general, it gives Wakander an obvious flaw that needs to be fixed over the course of this campaign. Like, look, I think Wakander's always going to be a bumbling fool in one way or another, but it's clear that this is going to be his character arc. He's going to learn, he's going to mature. He's still going to be that lovable guy, but he's going to be a little bit more weathered by the end of this journey. At least that's what I'm feeling. And that is awesome. Look, a lot of people don't build their character with having these sorts of obvious flaws, when really you should. You really should, actually. Characters that have these sort of arcs, sort of character development, they are a lot more interesting. And yeah, some people might find it annoying that Sam's character has this problem. I find it inspirational because it's the kind of problem that you can see and you can mend over time. Imagine 50 episodes down the line where we see the more matured version of Wikander. I think it's going to be very, very interesting. Honestly, if Sam takes his character in the direction I think he's taking him, this could be his best work yet. The point is, having these kind of instigating characters is great. Keeping in mind your own character's flaws, that's all great. And by doing so, I think you're going to make much, much better characters for your tabletop games. But yeah, that's everything I took away from Critical Role Campaign 4, Episode 5. I hope you guys are looking forward to the next tables as much as I am. In any case, if you guys want to see more of our content, then you might want to check out this previous episode where I talked about romance in tabletop. We saw a little bit of lovey-doveyness between Hal and Taisha's characters. Maybe you want to do that yourself. So if you do, that video is linked in the cards. But before you go, please do let me know if you are loyal to the tavern by heading down to the comments and leaving the comment Instigate to let me know you made it to the end of the video. Oh, also, leave a like on this one and subscribe to Crispy's Academy so you don't miss any of our content as it comes out. And finally, if you want to support us directly, then head over to our Patreon or buy our merch. These are things that make these videos possible. In essence, like, comment, subscribe, support. I will see you all next time. Farewell. Here, most people already know each other. And, here, everyone's mostly familiar with each other.